Hey guys, we are so excited to have you guys with us today. Today is Human Trafficking Awareness Day. As you guys know, this is something we are passionate about. This is something you are passionate about. We constantly walk around and talk about how amazing you guys are. You guys are fighting trafficking at a local level in Texas and all around the world. So we are just so honored to get to do this with you. Today we have a very exciting conversation. As you can see, we are joined by the beautiful Polly Hamp. She is on our panel. She's an amazing woman. She's a longtime friend of SOS. And I'm going to go into a little bit about her bio before we start. But I wanted to go ahead and give you guys the heads up today. We are a family brand. And as you know, we love having your kids be a part of the conversation. This is not a conversation for your kids. We are going to be having an adult conversation today. So if you have little ones around, why don't you save this and come back and revisit it later, because this is not something, you're going to get a lot of awkward questions if you listen to this around your children. So we do not want that for you. So we just wanted to give you that heads up. As I said, Christy and I are joined this morning by the beautiful Polly Hamp. She is an author, speaker, counselor. I think you're technically defined as a coach, yes? Not a counselor? A coach. Her and her husband, Bob, run an organization called Think Differently. And they have just started going around the US and the world, equipping people to process trauma and get to the other side of it. So Polly is a dear friend of ours. Polly actually used to work in the sex industry, and she is going to tell us a little bit about her story today and kind of what that looked like in her life and how she got out of that and how she came today. So Polly, can we just start with you telling us a little bit about the early parts of your story, about how you got into that industry, what happened in your life that led you there?
Absolutely. So first, I just want to say thank you for having me, because I love you guys, and it's such an honor to get to be on the panel and serve with you guys. And just so thank you, because I have such a passion to help also free women and men from this industry. And so, a little bit about, becoming somebody who works in the sex industry. It doesn't just happen like, oh, I think I'll become a stripper. Oh, I think I will start prostituting. Oh, I think I'll do this. There's always something that leads up to those moments and those choices. And mine, like a very high percentage of women, is my story started with abuse. And I started being sexually abused at a very young age. And with that, when you start being abused, whether it's sexual, verbal, physical, or neglect, everything shifts in your being. And so I started, instead of becoming introverted, I became incredibly extroverted. And every sexual thing awakened in me. And even though there was something wrong and the threats were there and all that, I so wanted to be loved and thought that if this is what love is, I can go out and find it. And so because of the sexual abuse that started, the earliest memories I have is age 3. I don't know if it started earlier. It stopped around age 7, 8 years old. But when that happened, people took things away from me. As I grew up, I started making choices, and people still stole from me, but I was looking for it. Excuse me. And so when your view of love and your view of sex and your view of healthy expression and connection gets so skewed by abuse, you end up making choices. And I ended up choosing going into the sex industry. It was, how do I say this? It was very, when you navigate, if you were to look at it and go, gosh, if you were to look at all the things that I did in high school and all the things that I did in elementary school and all the things I did in junior high, screaming out for somebody see me. I was dancing, like I was thinking about some of the questions you sent me earlier, and I would dance provocatively at age 8. And, I'd stay home sick from school because I was wanting to always be sick because I didn't want to go to school. And I would dance provocatively to Rolling Stones. So yes, I'm dating myself. But it was already in me. and I'm already having sex with guys. I'm already, you know, sneaking out, doing all of these things, you know, using drugs, drinking, everything to numb, everything to find love, everything to be rebellious, everything to say, will you please see me? And when I got to college, uh, I compartmentalized, which a lot of people do in the sex or do with trauma. You compartmentalize your lives, and I'm like, I'm going to go to college. I'm an art major, film minor. I wanted to be in animation. It was my heart. And I get there, and I'm like this sweet little college student. And a friend of mine from high school that had graduated a year earlier was DJing at a strip club and said, hey, you want to come and dance?
So, I know your story is so powerful, Polly, and I'm amazed at how much I run into, especially talking with young girls now, this concept of stripping, whether it's an OnlyFans account or this concept of being able to make money off of their body. And so in your story, when did you first start thinking about stripping? What led to that? I mean, obviously there was the abuse, but do you remember a point in time where you decided, okay, let me go try this?
That is a great question. I think the sexuality and the whole being able to think I'm controlling people with my body, thinking that I'm in charge of that when I really wasn't, uh, just, but just the illusion of that. I think the sexual part of it, but I don't remember actually in high school going, oh my gosh, I would love to be a stripper. You know, I don't, I'm trying to remember, but I'm pretty sure that was not in my, like my conscious. And I used to go clubbing. You know, we would go clubbing in Dallas. I was a hard rocker, like I loved heavy metal. And also I loved all the, what do you call it? EDM. We didn't call it EDM back then, but back then, back in the old days. Um, but, you know, so we would do that, but stripping still wasn't like, I'm going to become a stripper. And so it wasn't until college, until I had that friend, quote, friends are bad, that friend who, you know, said, hey, you know, you're young, you're pretty, you could make a boatload of money. And, you know, are you interested in stripping? And I'm like, huh, that might be fun. And, you know, the thought I had that came with that was, this is my chance to control men. And I get to control them, whether they pay me, touch me, whatever. That was my mindset of like, this is my turn. And which is a crock. It's a lie from the pit of hell, because I did not have control of me.
That sentiment, that control, this is my chance to get control, that's a sentiment we actually come across so much on social media right now, with the push to legalize prostitution, with OnlyFans accounts, with Cardi B praising stripping as what set her life up. Like, that sentiment is one we're coming across, and it's framed as a woman empowerment sentiment. So as someone who had that mindset, how quickly did your life kind of begin to spin out of control once you decided, like, I'm going to take back control, I'm going to decide what happens to my body, and you started to decide to use your body this way? How quickly did the opposite happen?
Immediately. It was immediate. You step into it, you have this illusion of like, you know, screw you men. You know, it's like I am queen and I can control the whole scenario. And it was immediate that, you know, from the managers, from the DJ, from everybody, even though, you know, some of the managers were really kind. And, you know, we come across that, you know, when we've gone into the strip clubs, the managers are like, you know, I'm just here to take care of the girls. And so, but it's still, they own you. You hand money over. You get drinks because you have to be drunk or high to do it. And so it was immediate switch of going, wait a second. But the fight for that, I'm in control. It's, I'm trying to think of how to put the words to it. The fight to be able to say, I am female, hear me roar. You know, feminism rocks, all that kind of stuff, and I'm kicking butt and I'm taking names. You know, you don't step into the sex industry. You step into it believing that you're in charge, but the immediate effects of mental health downcline, the immediate effects of just the way that you're spoken to. You know, we want to fight for women to not have men, you know, to be worried about jogging down by themselves with earbuds and without having to worry about being raped. You know, well, you step in the sex industry, that's your life. Yeah. And you may not be raped, but you are coerced, you are asked to have sex, you are touched, you are looked at the ways that we all say men shouldn't look at us outside of a strip club.
Yeah. Well, there is, I mean, I know we've talked a little bit, there's a mass grooming right now happening of a younger generation on the internet. I mean, TikTok, I'm a female who's on TikTok. The algorithm constantly feeds me how to be a sugar baby, how to be a stripper from people that are doing it. BuzzFeed has done long form videos of prostitutes talking about the benefit of it. It's that lie. I mean, even if you hadn't have come across that, the way that the generations right now are massively coming across it, you still believe that lie. Like you still naturally went to, this is how I gain control. And it's being fed right now to so many young girls. So what would you say to a young girl that was coming across that information and thinking about it?
That's a hard one because, you know, I think about myself as a young girl. And if I had some older woman, even if she had been in the industry, come up to me and say, this is the reality of the industry. You know, the reality of you don't own yourself. The reality of, you know, after you've had sex with 5 guys in one day, what do you feel like? The reality of the words that are spoken over you, the reality of how you're thought about, the reality of shame, the reality of why do I change my name to be somebody different on a stage and I can't be my real self? The reality of separating your soul. And, you know, if I had a 48-year-old woman tell me the realities at 15 years old, 18 years old, I'm like, girl, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know. You know, I have it together. So we tell the girls, what I would want to tell the girls is, would you just take a second and listen? Just listen. I just want to plant a seed. I just want you to know you're going to make your own choices. And do I want you to make that choice? No. Do I want you to be raped 3 times a day? More? No. Do you know what rape is? Have you ever been raped? Let's talk about what that is. Because girls that are looking at this, they see the glamour side of it, but nobody talks to them about what rape is. Who's talking to them about mental health? Who's talking to them about how many drugs and how many Jack and Cokes you have to drink to be able to get back up on the stage? And how many STDs can you get because you slept with guys you don't even know their name? And so telling a 14-year-old, 15-year-old girl who's going, I'm going to be a Cardi B. Just so you know, Cardi B is also owned. She's not free. She's owned by a music industry that will prostitute her until she's dead. And so if you look at her thinking that she's free, she's not. And we want to think that our sexuality is we can control with it and we can get whatever we want with it. And you can get a lot of stuff with it. You can get a lot of Gucci bags. You can get a lot of Louis Vuitton. You can have all the outfits. You can have great hair. You can have perfect eyelashes and you can have eyebrows, but you can never get your soul. You can't pay for your soul. And when you have prostituted and been prostituted. And when you have given yourself away to every single person that is ripping you apart, at the end of it, what do you have? And telling a 14-year-old that, and telling a 15, 18-year-old that, who's gyrating on TikTok and who's learning how to, you know, become a stripper, I would say to them, and I would say to you, if you're listening, just ask some questions. Rebellion feels good. It works in our, you know, our brain. It like feeds dopamine, and it's like a drug. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is kind of fun and exhilarating and exciting. But the first time you're raped, that adrenaline goes away. And you will be raped. In the sex industry, you will be raped. In the sex industry, you will have the cruelest things said to you. It's guaranteed. There's no percentage that does not happen. And I would tell you, at a 14-year-old and a 16-year-old and an 18-year-old, even some of the 8-year-olds that are out there, just stop for a minute and just ask some of the questions. Do I know what rape is? Do I know what it feels like? And do I think by using the sex industry and by using my body to, if I have been sexually abused, to use that, will rape make that a healing part of my life? Just ask the questions.
Polly, I love your candidness to ask the hard questions, to put the words on it that are the words that I think all of us hesitate to use, but at the same time, it's just the truth of it. And if a young girl is considering it, you know, wanting to have that transparency of, no, this is the situation. And I want to talk about your book for a minute, because I love the candid way in which you're very real. You don't sugarcoat anything, but at the same time, I mean, honestly, I read your book and I felt like I was just sitting on a couch with you and you were telling me your story. Now, I've known you for a really long time, but it's amazing to me that as an author that your heart and that candidness can come through in your writing. And one of the portions that I really loved that you brought into your story was your understanding of mental health and your understanding of the counseling through trauma, and the way even that you, at one point about halfway through your book, you brought up this example and this diagram of like the layers of fight or flight all the way up into identity. And you began to talk about in very specific ways how this was your story, this was your experience, and this is how it impacted you in a mental health way, and some of those cycles that you would get caught in. And I just think it was a really, really powerful thing. But honestly, I mean, there are so many things I love dearly about you, Polly. And I've just had the pleasure of knowing you for a long time and watching you walk through a lot of seasons. But you have a fierceness of, you're not just going to contend for yourself, for your own freedom. This is your story, and the freedom that you've walked to is absolutely amazing. But there's also a fierceness in you that you're now contending for it for others. And so, you know, whether it's in your role through We Are Cherished and working in strip clubs, working with Triple X Church, working with Truckers Against Trafficking. I don't know why I had trouble getting that one out. Or even what you're doing here at SOS, the way that you have found so much healing for yourself, and you've put yourself back in the fight to help bring freedom for others. And it's just an incredible thing to watch. And honestly, like even in my own story of how I got involved in the anti-trafficking fight, it's that sentiment of women who will say, this was my hell and I'm going to go back and fight it. That is so inspiring for me to be a part of the journey of, man, if you can go back and face that, I want to be there side by side with you, because it's going to take a whole bunch of us to stop this. And so that's just absolutely amazing to me. But how do you go back in and fight that?
Well, it's a great question.
It's a good question. Sorry.
How do you go back in? It is.
Sorry.
What, Hannah?
We're not asking you easy questions today.
No, don't ask me easy questions. You know, it's one of those things. It's like, how can you not?
Yeah.
How can you not? but in my journey, you know, there have been times where I'm like, when I started We Are Cherished, that was 10 years ago, you guys, which is crazy. When I started that, and I'm like, I have to go back in. Of course, it was a fight in the beginning. I'm like, there's no way in hell I'm going back in, because no, you know, it's like, do you know how hard I've fought to get out? And I was only in the sex industry for 2 years. And the women I've worked with and had the opportunity to know, these incredible women who've chosen to step out of it, you know, have had years in the industry. And so to go back in, it's like, how can you not? Yet it's a daily fight, because, you know, today I don't do the We Are Cherished anymore, and I don't go into the strip clubs anymore, but I work individually with men and women a few times a week to help them find freedom for themselves. And it's not all sex industry based, but it's because so many of them just made different choices in their journey. And so it is that you know, I stopped dancing when I was 20. And the only reason why I stopped is I tried to kill myself. And I had a gun, and I was done. I'm like, why am I here? And, you know, if the world's going to shred me and I'm going to shred myself, what's the purpose? And God had a different purpose. And I really, truly believe the only reason why I'm alive is because there, at that time I was atheist. And so, you know, God was like, hey, I got you, turn over your gun. And then I went into a inpatient program for a while. I'd love to say that I was completely healed, but it has been I was counting. It's been 30 years since I've been in the sex industry, because I'm 48. Is that right? 48 minus 18 is 30.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't math well.
I was looking at Christy like, that's right.
Hey, as long as it's simple math, I got your back.
Get your hands out.
I got it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. But it's just like, it's taken me, and still, I am still in therapy and for trauma. And, you know, because I still help others in trauma does not disqualify me, even if I still have my own trauma that I'm walking through. None of us are disqualified. It's the heart in which you go in and love extravagantly, not expecting to save them, but to help them see who they are and who they're created to be, to help them get to make the choice. Because I always believe if we go in and make choices for them, then we're just like the pimps. We're just like the sugar daddies. We're just like all the people that have destroyed them. So the power of choice, and the same thing with me, you know, going back to your question, Christy, is like, how did you go back in? What is that thing? It's like that choice of going, okay, I'm going to fight and work my butt off to heal. And it's hard, you guys. It's hard. Trauma sucks, and it affects every aspect of your life. But I also want to fight for others. And even if you're not the one who wants to go step in and fight on the front lines, face to face with people, the power that you have in prayer, the power that you have in volunteering with SOS or different groups. TAT is Truckers for Trafficking. I can't say it, so it's just TAT.
I know what that's about for.
Yeah. Thank you for that, not analogy, but what is it called? Acronym. Thank you for the acronym. And it's, you know, and so there's so many ways for people who have the heart and desire to use their story, or if you just have a heart and you don't have that story that's connected to it, you're like, this is in me, there is something I want to do to step in it and make a difference, just one little step at a time. And, you know, do some research, post some memes, you know, look at statistics, donate. You know, there's so many ways for us to be able to step in it and not have to be on the front lines. And, you know, there have been times like after I finished We Are Cherished, you know, I'm like, I'm out. I was on the panel of, and I'm like, but I can be behind the scenes and I'll do some, stuff there. But I'm like, I can't do this anymore. It was hard, and not just going into the clubs and working with people. It's just hard. And so, so I don't know if that answered your question, or if you have more questions attached to that, or.
I have a question kind of attached to that, because one thing you're really good at is making safe space for messy situations. And sexual abuse and sex industry work and trafficking, I mean, that is such a messy thing to come out of. And every journey into it is unique, and every journey out of it is unique. And I mean, we've seen, and I'm sure you've seen 1,000 times in working with these women, they come out, sometimes they slip up and go back in, sometimes they come out again. Like, it is a messy, messy process. And you're so good at creating safe places for girls to step out into freedom. How do you do that?
You do ask hard questions. It's kind of going back to choice, what I said. It's always an invitation, and there's no judgment. There's no condemnation. There's no expectations of behavior modification. It's always about identity. It's always about, how do I, for one, if you have made this step into being curious about being free from any part of the sex industry, or even your own story of sexual assault or abuse, anything like that, if you have made one brave step because an invitation was there, or something inside of you was like, I need change, the fact that you have done that is the biggest celebration ever, because you are choosing to fight for yourself. And when we choose to do that, everything starts shifting. And y'all, like you said, Hannah, it's messy. It's messy, and there's no formula to it. There's no like ABC, and we just can't do that, because each human is a unique person. Each story is unique to them, and two people might have experienced the exact same thing, yet their telling of it and their experience of it is completely different. And so it always starts with an invitation. It's always like, I am so glad you're here, and let's just get to know each other, and just connecting to the heart. And it's like, I don't need you to perform for me. I don't need you to say the right things. I don't need anything from you. What I want is your heart and the authenticity of who you are, and I will journey along with you as you find those pieces. And whether you go back into the industry, I'm not like you. I'm not going to say, hey, I can't believe you did that. What's wrong with you? I worked so hard to get you out, because your journey is not my journey. Your story is not mine. And so it is that building a safe place and understanding that my lenses are not theirs. And so if I can step into their story, and if I can love them and help them understand that they matter, then their heart gets to grow, and they get to find the pieces that have been shattered, have been lost, and have been stolen. And so really building that safe place, really taking time to know somebody, and no pressure, no judgment. And I think, one of the things that was really important to me in We Are Cherished is changing the mindset of people and how they saw the women in the sex industry. Because there's so much like, you whore, you slut, I can't believe you're doing that. It's like, well, what if you were to stop and step back and actually ask them questions about how they got into it? What if you were to understand that the realities of the sex industry, up to 95% of the women in the sex industry have been sexually abused as children? Do you know that? And I would say 99%. And so it's this shifting of a thought process of going, I can't just look at somebody and assume I know their story and assume and make judgments and assumptions about who they are without inviting them into a conversation, throwing away judgments, assumptions, and all that out the window and just saying, hey, baby girl, I'm so glad, even if it's just for a moment, you chose to fight for yourself.
That's huge, Polly. I know one of the big things that we come against a lot is, and I think it's human nature to try and label things, right? To try and stereotype. If we can call it a certain thing, then it makes sense and we can justify it in our mind. And I know for us, like one of the keys I've really found as I walk in relationship with girls through these messy situations is choosing not to label things. And like you said, I mean, it's so much abuse. And honestly, like I know today we're talking in a lot of extremes about, you know, abuse into sex industry and abuse into trafficking, because that is the reality of it, right? Like you work with these girls and you see all of it stems in abuse. But if I take even a step back further from that, I mean, statistics today tell me that 1 in 4 women is a victim of abuse and 1 in 6 men. And so that means that you and I are surrounded by men and women who know the pain of abuse, and you know, they don't necessarily know it to the extreme, but I think it's a very real society issue that we're facing. I mean, Polly, I read an article last week that told me that Pornhub was the 3rd most influential website for our society right now. Like this issue is all around us. And there are layers of it, right? And so I love your story and your heart for helping women find freedom and men find freedom across every level of it, right? Whether it's trafficking, whether it's sex industry, whether it's just, hey, I've been abused and walking through that. So what would you say to the person that finds themselves watching this that either knows somebody that's been abused or they themselves have been abused? What is that first step for them in reclaiming, healing, and finding that next step on their journey?
So is a question about, for the person that has been abused, what would be their next step, or the person that might know somebody that is?
I think both.
Okay.
Like what are the first steps into healing? And it's not necessarily for people that have seen the far end of I'm in the sex industry or I've been trafficked, but for the everyday person whose life is touched by abuse.
So I first would talk to the people who maybe don't have an abuse in their background. And sometimes people can feel guilty. It's like, I didn't have it that bad. You know, my stuff isn't that bad. And it's like, it's not a competition. It's not. And so you know, your story is your story. And so, but if you like, I don't have abuse in my background, I'm so glad. I love that you don't have abuse in your background, and you don't have to feel guilty for not having abuse in your background if you talk to somebody who does have abuse in their background. And so if somebody were to ever come up to you, like a friend, a family member, anything like that, and just say, hey, you know, or just kind of randomly, a lot of times people who have experienced trauma will just like randomly blurt stuff out, and it's like, what did you just say? Did you just say that you what? You know, let's not just pass by that thing that you just said to me, because that's a big freaking deal, you know? And so when somebody shares parts or snippets of their abuse story, the most important thing is to always believe them, even if it seems unbelievable. And especially if this is a child. If a child comes to you and says, hey, so-and-so touched me here, or this happened, and if you're like, oh, it wasn't that bad, or, you know, don't worry about it, just stay away from them, you know, all of the classic, you know, we have all this whole thing on stranger danger, but I can't remember the percentages, but it's pretty high that it's not a stranger that will sexually abuse a child. And so if a child ever says anything to you, immediately believe them, and don't push it off, because if you do, they may never tell anybody ever again. They will shut down. It's like, okay, that's not safe. And so the same thing with an adult. If somebody comes and tells you, hey, I have this in my story, this is like, oh my gosh, you know, you can even say, I don't know what to say, but thank you for trusting me with your words. Thank you for trusting me with your story. I can't imagine how scary that must have been. Instead of, please don't push them off and say, oh, it's not that bad, or, you know, anything like that. Just, it's empathy. It's connecting to their heart and just saying, thank you for trusting me. Even if you don't know what to say, you can say, I don't know what to say, and thank you for trusting me. Now, for those of you guys that have an abuse story, that, you know, I meet several people who have have not shared their story because they got shut down as a child, and or just, you know, I'm just afraid to share it because, like, as I was a child, I was threatened that if I said anything, everybody that I loved would be harmed. And so you just don't talk, except everything is communication, and my expression of my pain came out in wildness. And so if you have a story and you're like, I'm afraid to share it, I'm ashamed of it, I'm embarrassed of it, you know, it was my boyfriend or whatever in high school, and I was raped, and or we had sex, and but he did horrible things to me, and, you know, I got pregnant or had abortion, or I gave a child up for adoption or anything like that, and you've got so much shame that weighs down on your heart. First, I just want you to know that you're not alone. And that's a big deal, to know that you're not alone. And I hate to say this, but there are a lot of unsafe people out there that are not safe people to share your story with. But I will say this, there are a lot of incredible people out there that you can share your story with. And that brave step, that choice to step in and say, I think I'm ready to heal. I think I'm ready to share this. I think I'm ready to talk. Find somebody that you feel is safe. But if they end up not being safe, please don't give up. Just because that one person wasn't safe doesn't mean everybody else isn't safe. You are worth fighting for. You are worth having your story really well cared for. And you are very worth being healed from it, because you don't have to carry it the rest of your life.
That's so good. Thank you for sharing that, Polly. I just thank you for sharing who you are, for sharing your story, for not being afraid to go there, both in the ugly and in the truth and in the beauty that you found in it. I just so appreciate your heart and your willingness to come and have this candid conversation with us today. Like, it is just such an honor to know you and to walk alongside you and to see how you choose to live your life and the freedom that you bring to so many around you. I know last time I talked, you're getting ready to do a training. Let's see if I remember correctly. It's in February or March, the training that you're going to do in Austin.
Oh, yes. I've been asked to speak at a counselor's conference about trauma and sex trafficking and all that, and because of my story and stuff like that. And so I love it because I'm not a licensed counselor, but they've asked me to be a part of it. I'm like, thank you. So I'm really excited about it, to help kind of equip counselors also who are coming across this, because of the rising of all the things that are happening in our world right now.
That's incredible. Well, thank you for being a voice for so many and for coming on here today and sharing your story. We're going to go ahead and drop a link. If you have not had a chance to read Polly's book, it is incredible. You got snippets of it today, but there's just so much deep truth. And so we're going to drop a link to that in the comments. If you hadn't had a chance to read that, we recommend it. And then also Bob and Polly, it's a counseling academy. You have all kinds of classes, e-classes, webinars. We're going to go ahead and drop links to that in the comments as well. So if you are looking for great resources on healing, on trauma, on any of the subjects that we covered today, we just really recommend that you would check them out and get involved. And Polly, thank you. Thank you for joining us today, for sharing your story, and just thank you for who you are.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. I love you guys. I'm really grateful. Thank you.
We love you.